All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. SQL Dev DBA here, and today we're doing some project planning. The reality is there's not going to be a lot of coding here, if any. I just did this session in Spanish earlier today, and there was maybe an ounce, just an ounce or half an ounce of code that I did. I measure all my code in ounces, as should you. There's no real good explanation for that. That's not a thing, measuring code in ounces. I measure it in post-it notes. So what are we doing here today? Well, again, we want to plan out a project. The reality is I've done projects in front of y'all all the time. I will either do SQL Server projects or I'll do Power BI projects, and sometimes I've even done like end-to-end kind of stuff. You've seen it in videos. If you haven't, I'm gonna put one here, put one video here or over there, somewhere over there. But basically it shows you, this is a video that'll show you end-to-end how I take data from SQL Server, or from Kaggle really, into SQL Server and out into Power BI to make a report. This is not that. This video is going to be part of a multi-part series. I haven't decided how many parts exactly, but multi-part series where I want to take data from my sim racing machine, which is somewhere that way. I'm sure you can see it because I'm pointing at it, but it's somewhere over there, and I want to use it to create data in my sim racing rig, or in my sim racing games, specifically F1 2023, which, if you're a sim racing diehard fan, you could make the argument it's not a real sim racing simulator, but the reality is none of them are real racing simulators. So we're going to use F1 2023 to create data. Then we're going to take that data, download it, and import it into SQL Server. And then from SQL Server, we're going to create Power BI reports. Now, we're not going to do that in this video, just to not set you up for disappointment. What we're going to do in this video is plan that out, how we're going to do that. And why do I want to share that? Well, again, I've never really shared the project planning process with you all. The project planning has always kind of just rested in here, but that's not how it works in the real world, or at least that's not how it should work. If you have an organized team, the reality is you should be planning these projects out. You should be creating tasks for each person. Morse 314, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining. Soup to nuts, exactly. That's how it should be. At least out in the real world, that's how it is. We get together, we plan projects, we assign tasks. Those folks are responsible for tasks, and we're going to talk about different tools that I use to plan projects out. We're also going to talk a little bit about meetings, and I'll show you why in a second, but we're going to talk about meetings a little bit. Everyone's favorite thing to do is meetings. We're going to talk about sprints. If you're familiar with the AGILE framework of development, we're going to talk a little bit about sprints and how they work, and my experience with them. So I should clarify, why should you take anything I say seriously? Well, I have been in the data space for about 12 to 14 years now, about 12 to 14 years. And I've been a manager for about 8 to 9 of those. I've been a team lead for longer than that. And I've been in charge of planning projects for a long time. I want to say all of them have gone successfully. Some of them may have been delayed, but that's how it goes. And we'll talk about that as well today. But it is part of the process. And I want to show you the process from both aspects, from the managerial side, and also from the developer side, what you can expect as a developer, sort of a day-to-day life of a data team. You don't have to take my word for it. It's absolutely fine. I'm just going to be talking about my experience because I want to share that with y'all. That's something that I don't feel is shared enough, and I want to give you some insight into what that looks like. first, I'm gonna do a quick gear check, just because. Well, you'll see in a second. Let's. There's no real introduction I can do to it. Let's just take a look. This school bus, in the shape of a keyboard, is the Logitech Pop Keys Mechanical. Pop Mechanical. I'm not really sure what it's called. Something to the effect of pop and mechanical, and it's a school bus. That's really the only way to explain it. It was on sale on Woot, and I said yes, I've got to have that just because it's different. I don't know. Logitech Pebble mouse. This one I usually use to travel. It's usually in my travel bag, but I thought it probably paired well enough. Maybe I should have painted some part of it yellow, but I didn't think of that. And then DeltaHub.io wrist pad to keep my wrist rested, I guess, because it slides along with my wrist. HyperX wrist rest, which is a bit thicker than standard. This is a pretty thick wrist rest, but it's gel and it's cooled, which is great and kind of matches the thickness of this, what I have going on here. And so why I said I wanted to talk a little bit about Agile was because of these. I'm going to show you what these are in a second, but they are basically, as you can see, a sort of playing card deck, and I'll show you why they are important to the process in a bit. So let's get started. Let's talk about a few things. Let's talk about the project at hand. Let's talk about what the goals are of this project, and then we can move on to a few of the phases that I do while I'm planning projects. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple of tools that you can use to plan these projects. But first, I want to make sure that I outline what the project's goal is, what the intention is, what are we seeking to do with this project. And for that, lately, I've been using Loop. Loop is a product from Microsoft, and it's usually included as long as you have Microsoft Office. You can really do this in a lot of different applications, Jira being one of them. I was actually going to demo this on my Jira account, but Jira lately has started charging a lot of money to be able to even use the account for development purposes. And so I'm not able to do it in Jira. Usually I'd use like something like Confluence inside Jira, but I can't. But I do have a Microsoft Office account, as most of you probably do as well. If you either work professionally or you are a student, you do have a Microsoft Office account. And Loop is just one of those applications that's part of the Microsoft Office suite. So let's take a look at Loop right now. And it's right here. Now, I have a couple different projects inside of Loop. And I have this one called Data-Driven Sim Racing, and what we're going to do is basically create a brand new sort of project brief, tech spec, whatever you want to call it, that'll allow us to kind of collect our thoughts and just get a project outline going, get a mission going, start adding folks to the project, assigning different things, that sort of thing. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is, again, since I did this in Spanish already, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Spanish version on another screen so I can have a little bit of a guideline, because I want to make sure I repeat more or less the same process. And here what we have is just a blank page, but the reality is I can just use a standard project brief template. There's a lot of templates in this template gallery, as you can see, but I'm going to use the project brief template, because that's going to give me the ability to just start filling things in instead of worrying how this project brief is going to look or how the overview is going to look. So here we can see that we have a quick overview, we have some goals, we have some team members, we have some project deliverables, and some links. And you can keep expanding on this. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this template. And here we have a project brief. We're going to call this the F1 telemetry project, and the directions are to use this template to kick off a new project. I'm gonna go ahead and delete those. One of the reasons I need this keyboard is because I'm not sure if you saw. Let's go back for a second. this keyboard has emoji keys at the end. And that's essential for database development. As any good database developer will tell you, emoji keys, those are important. So let's go back and use them. All right, so we can see that this project up here requires an icon. And here I can choose whatever icon I want to add. For this one, we're going to add a Formula One style car. I don't have an emoji key for that, unfortunately. I just have like crying face, hugs, smiley face, praying hands, and fire. Don't need any of those, but it's good to know that I have emoji keys available to me. We're also going to add a cover, let's say a data cover, and it's going to generate lots of different AI style images. That one looks like it's great, so we'll go ahead and use that. Here, you could just start typing, and it uses something called Markdown. For those of you who are familiar with Markdown, you can use Markdown with it, and you can also just hit slash and start. Let's see if it'll actually let me. Nope, it's not going to let me today. It's going to make me look dumb. There we go. I started typing, and if I say, okay, if I hit slash, you have a few options, including adding tables, checklists, to date, callouts. You can even add code here. You can add math equations, because I know all of you love adding math equations. And then you can do some formatting here, quotes, codes, headings, that sort of thing. There's lots of templates. You can tag a person. You can pick some emojis. Those are really important again. You can add some images, and you can even add stuff from GitHub, from Planner, Jira, and Trello. Speaking of Trello, it's going to be another one that we're going to use, or at least we'll walk through it a little bit. But here's the overview. Add inspirational quote here. Does anyone have a good quote that we can add? I'll add one. A little nonsense now and then is relished by the wisest men. That's Wonka. That's a wonderful quote. Candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker. All right, that's another one. All right, so what's the overview of this project? Here, we're just going to say what the project's purpose is, sort of a quick description of this project. So we're going to say something like this. Project seeks to some, AI type stuff. You can ask ChatGPT for a good overview for this project. I wouldn't, but hey, you can absolutely do that. This project seeks to create data sets using sim racing simulators, specifically F1 2023, which is not a simulator, as everyone knows. Import the data into SQL Server and report on it using Power BI. All right, the goals. What are the goals of this project? Again, this is going to be some very, very quick ones, just saying, basically outlining the different either technologies that we'll use or just the big milestones that we're going to have. So the first one is going to be collect data from F1 telemetry sim races, and here I can say using simracingtelemetry.com software, which, if you're not familiar with sim racing telemetry, it is an application for iOS, for Android, and for PC that allows you to record all of your sim racing sessions, and it'll let you output a CSV that you can then use Power BI or even Excel to analyze. It has a lot of analysis tools all on its own as well, but my favorite feature is allowing the export of the data so that we can analyze it in Power BI. In fact, I've done lots of different videos about it. I'm pointing to another video right now, I bet. Up there, you can see the video, or one of the videos that I've done this with. All right, number 2, ingest the resulting data into SQL Server and warehouse it. Now this step is going to be optional. Why is it optional? Is because technically speaking, Power BI works with CSV files directly. So technically speaking, you don't need SQL Server to house your data. We're going to do this as part of the project just so we can get more in your hands as far as experience goes, as far as development goes. But the reality is you could take the data straight from summarizing telemetry as a CSV, import it into Power BI, and you're good to go. And number 3, visualize the data using Power BI. Now, you don't have to use Power BI if you're more comfortable in another reporting platform like Crystal Reports. You can feel free to do it in Crystal Reports. I don't suggest that, but you can absolutely do that in Crystal Reports. Okay, and that's it. Well, we could say or any other. You know what? This is a project plan. We want to be very direct because who's going to be reading this? My team, any stakeholders, and my boss. They're all going to be reading this, and so I want to make sure I convey things as clearly and succinctly as possible. So let's add some team members here. We're going to add some team members, and those team members are going to be responsible for different tasks within my project. So let's add Morse 314. Morse 314 needs to work on some projects or some tasks here. We're also going to add SQL Dev DBA. That's me as part of the project. But instead of just adding my name, because I'm part of the process, what I can actually do is tag myself. And now anyone who wants to can come in here and see my profile or whatever from inside the organization. Obviously, I have a couple folks inside my organization. The first one is dev user. So dev user, and I actually just got a notification on my watch saying I've been added to this project, which is pretty cool. You'll get an email as well. So dev user is about to get an email right now saying, hey, you've been added to this project as a developer or as whatever role I gave it. So I'm going to let them go ahead and get it. It says to grant, it'll share and notify. And then we also want to add one for database administrator, who's DBA. And there we are. Now, Morse 314 is going to be our BI developer. Actually, Morse can be our sim racing engineer and data collector. That is essential to the project. So please get to work, Morse 314. Okay, so let's see. Myself, I'm going to be the architect and project manager. Dev user is going to be in charge of ETL, which is extract, transform, and load data. And database administrator is going to be DBA in charge and also a database developer. Now, my team's remote, so I can put the location if I really want to, if it's relevant to the project, just so that we know like things like time zones, when you can bother people, when you can expect not to hear back from them or not hear a response. That's absolutely fine. You can also put core working hours if you so desire, or you could just replace this with a completely different column if you wish, right? You can have something like what team they're a part of, like if someone's part of operations and not data, or if they're part of the marketing team, etc. You can put that here as well. I'm going to leave those blank for now. But then we have some project deliverables. And this, technically speaking, the project deliverables, I try to make those as clear as possible elsewhere in the project or elsewhere in the overview. We can say right here, for example, let's see, a heading that says deliverables, maybe a heading 2. That's a little bit too much. Deliverables, and we can say checklist. We'll add a checklist here and we'll say CSV files. We'll add PowerShell scripts and we'll add Power BI reports. Now we can go into a lot more detail here. I'm not going to, but here I am going to go into detail because this is actually going to be our tasks, like a task list. This one's important because here I actually want to make sure that everyone is aware of the tasks that they have, how long they have to do them, and who is going to be assigned to it. As you can see, here's the task, here's the assigned to, here's the due date, and here's something called a bucket. Now, let's start with the first task, and that is a sim racing task. So this is sim racing data collection, and I'm going to say all tracks here. I'm going to assign that to R, because I have this list up here. This one's going to be assigned to Morse 314. Not 315, 314. All right, there we go. The due date, I want to make sure that this is done by the 25th, because the reality is I'm trying to see if there's any way we can get this out by November 1st. So we can even add that to like the due date. We can say project timeline, and maybe we can just make this part of the deliverables, due by 11/1/2024. My apologies to any Europeans or the rest of the civilized world, basically, that uses date and month. Yeah, you're probably all asleep right now anyway, so it's okay. All right, so sim racing data collection for all tracks, that's Morse 314. We want it to be done by October 25th. That gives database developer. Oh no, we need someone to do the BI reports, don't we? Who's that going to be? Jan Donos. He was in our stream earlier, so he gets to be the BI. If you're not here to defend yourself, you're getting tasked with stuff. BI, Power BI reports. Or it could just be BI developer for Power BI. That's the role. And then he's getting any Power BI reports. All right, so download databases from sim racing telemetry. Download datasets. Download datasets from SRT app. That's going to be Morse 314 as well, or technically speaking, because it's ETL and it's sort of like data transfer, I can technically assign that to dev user. So we're going to go ahead and assign that to dev user. The reality is, because of the fact that Morse 314 is going to be done with our data by the 25th, I also want to task dev user with downloading these datasets by the 25th. I know from experience that downloading these datasets is not difficult. In fact, we're probably going to go through it right now in a little bit, and I know it's not difficult, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to task the dev user to have it done by the 25th as well. Great. So what's next? Move files to SQL Server for ingestion. Now, this step is again optional because technically we don't need SQL Server to be a part of this, because you can import the data straight into Power BI. However, we're going to make this part of the project, and for that we're going to also need dev user, and that needs to be done, I want to say, by Power BI development needs to start really soon, so the 28th, something like that. And here's where, I'm pretending to think really hard, right? But the reality is, that's the job of the manager or the architect or the project specialist that's putting this together. Is technically speaking, they need to know enough about these tasks. They need to be technical enough to know how long it's going to take and how long they need to give folks for flexibility reasons and to just keep the project on track. Now, if a good project manager is not very technical, then they are very good at asking they're very good at asking the technical folks how long they need to do something. And we're going to go a little bit over that right now, but they're very good at asking them how long they need so that they can properly plan. When can we expect to have X done, for example? So we're going to make sure that we have that identified. But for now, I'm just going to say that I need it done by the 28th. That's Monday. That means, no, you know what? Let's give the Power BI developer as much time as possible. What we're actually going to do is just ask them to do this without scripts. Meaning I don't need PowerShell, just literally drag and drop the data so that the BI developer can start developing their reports using just the CSVs, and then they'll circle back and change the data source over to SQL Server when that's ready. I think that's the way. The data is going to be identical or more or less identical anyway. There's no reason why the BI developer can't get started. So that's what we're going to do, just to give everyone as much time and flexibility as possible. That way, there's not a lot of pressure on the dev user. They're going to be okay to take their time. Now, we need to create Power BI reports from CSV files, and later switch Power BI reports to use SQL Server data. Now, both of these are going to be assigned to Jan Tonos. And they're both due on the 25th. It does not take very long. I know from personal experience, it does not take very long to switch the Power BI reports over to use SQL Server data. Up until the very last minute, Jan is free. He can feel free to keep going based on the on the CSV data, and then just switch at the last minute and we should be good to go. That's going to be a lot of pressure, but again, we need to roll this out as soon as possible. Okay, so I'm kind of done creating the initial list. I'm going to add some more, but to do that, I want to take it to a different sort of venue. Let's go ahead and add some relevant links here, including my first one, which is simracingtelemetry.com. That is where we're going to get our data sets. So technically speaking, it would be probably better if I went to the website, copied the URL, and then brought it back over here. There we go. Now it actually has sort of a banner style, so it makes it a little bit more attractive. That's a lot better. Okay, so let's take a quick break and let's talk about the Agile inspiration cards that we had out earlier. What do those look like? Well, again, they look like sort of playing cards, and that's pretty interesting. There's directions here on the back. If you want to get these, you can get them at agileinspirations.com. I am in no way affiliated with them. I have nothing to do with them. I'm just, I guess you can call me a happy customer. I bought these back, I think, like a week before pandemic hit in 2020. So I never really got to use them as much as I wanted to, but my team and I figured out a way to use them regardless. And so I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. But when you pull them out, they basically look like someone in the Spanish stream earlier called them Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and that was really hilarious. And I couldn't stop saying Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Shout out to Steve-O. If you ever watched this video, shout out to you, because that I can't get that out of my head. Unfortunately, they just look like Yu-Gi-Oh cards now. All right, so let's make sure I have them all. Catch them all? No? Okay, no, that's Pokemon. All right, I think that's it. Let's see. Let's arrange them. Basically, what they're supposed to mimic is poker cards, because they facilitate a game called Sprint Poker, or what's commonly known as Sprint Poker. And basically, the objective of the game is to be able to identify the complexity of a task. But if you look, there's actually 5 of the same exact cards, 5 sets of the same exact cards. This is meant for a team of 5 people. So all 5 people get an identical set of cards. And what you'll see here is that each one, starting at the very beginning, have numbers on them, and then these 3 are special cards. Now, the numbers start at 0, and they go 0 plus 1 is 1. Then we have 1 plus 1 is 2. We have 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. 13 plus 8 is 21, otherwise known as the Fibonacci sequence, for those of you who are developers, or I guess mathematicians. I'm sure they're aware. And it's meant to sort of demonstrate the complexity of a task. And so everyone holds these face down. We review a task that's on the board, and I call for everyone to choose a point or choose a card that represents the amount of points or the complexity of that task. Now, it's very important for the manager who's in charge of this to identify and establish the rules. So one person's 5 can be another person's 8, for example. But what I like to do is make sure that it's both complexity and also the amount of time that it takes you. So if something is very, very easy to do, but there's just so much of it that it's going to take a long time, you want to make sure you take that into account when you're deciding which number to use here. And that goes specifically for data tasks. For example, if there's a simple insert statement or a simple like, hey, we want to get data into this database, that's fine. But if there are 100 files, that's the difference between a 1 and a 21. And so that's what I try to make very clear. It's not only the complexity of the task, but also how long we think it's going to take. And so we have them face down. I call for everyone to turn over their cards. And let's say one person turns over a 5, the other person turns over a 1. Now, or, the rest of the team turns over a 1. Now, that has me at a critical point as a manager or as a team lead, whatever you want to call it, or even as a developer. I'm the single 5 in the group and everyone else picked 1. Now, it's very interesting. As a manager, it's very clear to me that someone, either one person or the rest of the group, doesn't quite understand what's at stake with this particular task. And so what we call for is sort of a discussion of, okay, why is this a 5 to the person who put 5, and then everyone else who put 1? I realized there were little animals on here, or there is a little animal on here. It's a little pig. Whoever picked a 1, please explain yourself. Whoever picked a 5, please explain yourself, because they're just so far off. And so usually what it turns into is a discussion, explanation, sometimes an argument about why something will take such a long time or why it won't. So that's really important to have as a discussion around the data. Eventually, you'll just keep repeating this until you get to an agreement. I try not to move on, and I establish that as a clear rule. I'm not going to move on until we're all in agreement about what it is. It could be that those who are familiar with the task at hand declared it a 1, and just one person who's not really sure just decided to pop a 5 in there just to guess. The reality is you can't look over your shoulder. You can't cheat in this game. You have to flip your card over at the same time. So it just keeps everyone really honest. If there's education that's needed, that's quite all right too. Now, there's 3. Actually, let's talk about the points system again really, really quick. I have a rule or a set of rules in my teams where if we have any 13s or 21s, those are at the very least need to be considered to split into 3 tasks or split into multiple tasks. And this one, it's not even a consideration for me at this point. For me, there are no 21s. That's just a rule I have, and so far it seemed to work out successfully. For me, there are no 21s in my projects. 21 just means I didn't do a good enough job as during my proposal to give you manageable tasks. So that's another thing we need to talk about is manageable tasks. We'll get to that in a second when we review Planner. All right, so we have our points. Now let's take a look at our 3 special cards here, our 3 special Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And they are the infinity symbol, a question mark, and coffee. So for me, infinity is sort of like a pseudo 21. Like, this is basically this person calling out for help, or I established that. Like, if you need to call out for help, whip out your infinity card. That just tells me, like, hey, there's no way that this task is going to get done. I don't even know the technology we're trying to use for it, or it's just a huge burden. We can't, it's just too much for us. That's when I tell folks to pull out the infinity card. Then there's the question mark, which just means I'm not really sure. I don't know enough about this technology, just like the infinity one. I can't rate it. I don't feel comfortable rating it just because I don't know enough, or I simply don't know at this point. There are other things that I have to resolve before I can give this one points, and that's quite all right. That just tells me I may need to delay the task at hand to a later date, or just have more discussions about it. And then we have the coffee. The coffee is basically meant for 2 purposes in my meetings. You can use these as you see fit, and agileinspirations.com does have instructions on how to use them, but the way I found to use this best was for 2 primary reasons. The first one was I need a break. Not just like, you know, I need a quick second or something like that. No, I need a break, or we all need a break. The discussions are too heated, or it's just too much going on. There's an issue that we need to resolve, something like that. I call for this one to always be a way where no one can question the fact that you need a break. Sometimes it's the team, but sometimes it's just one person that needs to go away for a second just because of something that's going on. They got to take a call. Discussions are too heated, too stressed out, whatever it is. I want them to have this option. The other one can be, I am abstaining from this vote, meaning I want nothing to do with this vote. I don't want my number to count, and I allow each person to do this at most 1 time per meeting. To say, I can't, if they're disconnected enough from the task, meaning they're not assigned to it, they have nothing to do with it, they have nothing to gain from it, I allow this once. And the reason I only allow it once is because you can't just keep folding. You know, if we're talking about poker here, you can't just keep folding. You need to be involved in the entire process. And it also helps you get a better understanding of the work and the workload that other people have. I want you to be able to correctly quantify, because that means you won't be pestering them during the development process. Hey, where's this thing I'm waiting for you on? It's like, hey, you remember when you agreed that that was an 8? That means you get to leave me alone for a couple days until I tell you that it's ready. So that sort of thing is what we want to keep in mind here. We want everyone involved in the process. All right, I'm done playing with my Yu-Gi-Oh cards, I guess. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to Planner. Now, how do we move on to Planner? Well, if you are using Loop, well, you're a little lucky. You're a little lucky because of the fact that this task list, what I've been building here, is actually what's known as a Kanban board. And when I click on task apps up here at the top right corner, right, or top right corner of this grid right there, I can open this in Planner. And what does that mean? That means I already have tasks right here. And for those of you who are used to development or have seen development on shows like Silicon Valley, or maybe you've seen it on Mythic Quest. Mythic Quest does this too. Basically, any show about software developers or just IT development in general usually has a board like this. It looks a little bit more elaborate than this, and let's get it to the point where this one's a little bit more elaborate. what we want to do here is we want to add some buckets. We have a to-do bucket, but we want to add an in-progress bucket, and we want to add a done bucket. That's not how you spell done, but we want to add the done bucket. That's not how you spell done either. I think it wants me to take the tutorial, so I'm going to go ahead and just oblige it for a second. There we go. Okay, so now we have in progress and done. It turns out that Morse 314 is already busy collecting all the data. But after a quick conversation, I realized I needed to be a bit more clear with Morse 314. I needed to add some more detail to this task. So how do I do that? Well, I open up the card, as you can see here, and I'm going to add a couple of different details. Things like a label. So here, for pink, for example, I'm just going to say this is sim racing. So we can establish like a category, and I'm just going to add it here as a label. Then I can add things like assigning to Morse 314. Morse 314 is not going to show up on this list, but I will be able to assign it. We'll push this into in progress, but I want to talk about that first because that sort of does a little bit of impeding on this bucket system that I have. So the start date, I'm going to assign it as today, and then the due date is already assigned from our loop document to the due date of 10/25. Now, let's add some detail so that Morse 314 is not confused, knows exactly what's expected of this task. So, here's the issue. And it's not really an issue, it's just a note, I guess. Your teams, it's up to you to know them best. And you need to know and understand that some of your team members will like a lot of detail and some of your team members will like very little detail, and they'll both be able to get the job done perfectly. But throughout my history, I've had team members who need explicit direction in their task. They need to know exactly what to do, and they're very good at it. They just need to know exactly what they're doing, so there's no questions. And there's team members who think that too much detail is kind of you trying to tell them how to do their job. And don't get me wrong, as a manager, it's kind of my job to tell them how to do their job, or not really how, but what's expected of them. But I also want to make sure I don't, I really want to make sure I don't offend them. I want to make sure it doesn't seem like I'm trying to micromanage what they're doing. And so let's say that Morse 314 is one of the people who wants as much detail as possible. So what I'll say is simulator is going to be F1 2023. Because we have so many simulators, we want to make sure we're very explicit about which one we need to use. Very direct. The track. So track 1 is going to be spa. Track 2 is going to be which one? Zandvoort. And track 3 is going to be Vegas. Great, so we have our tracks. Now, the sessions. We need to talk about the sessions. We have practice. We have qualifying. And we want to make sure we do Q1, Q2, and Q3. The practice, we want it to be 10 minutes long. And let's just say 10 minutes. That's Q2 and Q3. And then the race, we want a 5-lap race. Let's say we want 5 laps. We want normal weather. And is there anything else that we want to include in it? That's fine. Any other settings in the race, I'd just be able to add them if I need to, but I need to do that before Morse 314 starts, or at least ensure that whatever I do add is a little bit of is a small uplift and not too much. It's not going to change everything completely, right? And again, that's my job to know enough about Morse 314's job to know that what additions are going to be a lot of work, a lot of uplift, and which ones are not. So the reality is, though, we want to do maybe a checklist that allows them to say, okay, here's the practice, we want practice, we want qualifying, and we want the race. And then if we show this on the card, we can actually see it. Really, we can actually see them right here. And Morse314 can go through and check these off as they go. But I need all tracks here. And soon I realize, as a manager, that what I'm giving Morse314 is basically like a couple days, if not a week's worth of work in one singular card, and I'm expecting a points to be assigned to it. So we call out, we have our meeting. We have what's called a sprint planning meeting, where everyone gets together and just sort of decides how big these tasks are, any clarifying questions, and then gives them a point system based on the point system that we just discussed. Now, what I get back is 21 points. And then now I'm like, okay, this is bad. I need to separate this into 3 different tasks, right? So now what I'll do is just copy the task. And here, I'm going to copy it into 3 5s. The first one is going to be spa. And I'm going to copy the assignment. I'm going to copy the dates and hit copy. And now I have one just for spa. And I can turn this one into the second one, which is also 5 points. Or maybe 8 points. Maybe we turn 121 into 3 8s. 3 8s would be 24 technically, but it's okay. So now we want just track 2 here. So we say track is Zandvoort. That's 8 points, and we could still keep our checklist. That's absolutely fine. We have this one, which is, we're going to change it to 8 points, and we're going to copy it one more time for track 3. We'll copy the assignment, we'll copy the dates, and we will change this. Is that the one we need to change? Zandvoort. No, we need to change this one. The second Zandvoort, we need to change that to Vegas. And it's going to be track 3, Vegas. And now what we have are 3 different tasks that Morse can manage separately. And what does this mean? This means that we're going to be able to show completion of items throughout the week instead of just one at the end of the week. This means that whoever's responsible for the BI report is going to be able to see that those tasks are getting done and start asking for the data. They know they're starting to need to get ready for that data. But we're going to add one more bucket here, and that bucket is the blocked bucket. Now I want to put this blocked bucket right between the to do and the in progress. Why? Because technically speaking, the BI aspect of this is blocked until one of these is done. So if we see here, we say create Power BI reports from CSV, that's currently blocked. And move files from SQL Server, that's currently blocked. And download data sets from SRT application, that's currently blocked. So the reality is pretty much everything is blocked. And this one, switch Power BI reports, that's technically not even in scope right now because not even the original Power BIs have been created. So that doesn't necessarily have to be blocked. But this one is these are ones that I can put sort of pressure on. I can put a little bit of pressure and say, hey, the sim racing part needs to get done before anything can get done. And that leads me to meetings called stand-ups. If you are in the development world, you may be either groaning at the sound of me saying stand-up, or you may be reminiscing because your team just doesn't do them anymore. That's either one of those two can happen. Maybe some other feelings that I'm not really aware of. But basically, stand-ups are meant for teams to get together on a frequent basis, whatever that is, whether it's weekly, whether it is daily, whether it is twice a week or 3 times a week. You can have them on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can have them on Tuesday, Thursday. You can have them every Monday, every Friday, whatever your heart desires as a team. But basically their point is as a touch base. the meeting is called a stand-up because the original intent was for people to literally stand together in a circle, in a square, whatever you want, no sitting down, and that implies to how quick the meeting needs to be. This is a meeting that's meant to say, go around the room and tell us how you're doing. Tell us what tasks you completed since the last time we met, what tasks you plan to complete before the next time we meet, and what is being blocked for you. What are your blockers that are preventing you from getting work done? Now, as a manager, it is my job, technically. Sometimes project managers or sort of a round robin situation involves where different people are the what's known as a scrum master, and they basically are the ones that are tasked with calling on folks and keeping the meeting on track. And so I would go around the room and talk to every single person. Some people decide to do it task by task, others decide to do it person by person. So I would go to dev user, who is the DU here, and I would ask them where they are on all of their tasks. They'll tell me, hey, I'm waiting for Morse 314 to finish up their stuff before I can do mine. I'm working on some other projects, and that's it. Quick 1 minute spiel about how you're doing, and then we move on to the next. If there are any blockers, it is my job as the manager to take note of those and make sure that I address them. If someone needs a signature chased, that's my job as a manager. I'm also a contributor for my teams, so I will probably have some stuff to do here. In fact, we could probably see exactly what's being assigned to me here. Let's see, I am the architect. Oh, okay, so that means I have a special task, and that special task is, let's go back here. I'm gonna put it in the to-do for now. Create a flow diagram, a data flow diagram of project, data flow diagram. How about that? And I need to make sure that that I'm the one that's assigned to it. I'm going to add the task. I'm going to assign myself to it. There I am. And then I'm going to put it in the to-do bucket. That's fine. The label can be project planning. So I'll edit the purple one and say it's a project plan. Choose that. And then here I can spec out what my different plans are, or what the document needs to look like. For example, I have some specs that I have from my earlier stream. So I want to create a data diagram with LucidChart to show the project plan. Be sure to provide as much detail as possible. Things like the data source, the data collection, what output file they need to be, the database they need to go into, and the fact that it's a Power BI report. And then, as you can see, I have a note that says the diagram was created and that it's available in LucidChart with a link to the LucidChart page for it. So technically speaking, this is done, and I'll show you what it looks like. Here it is. I created it for my Spanish stream, so I won't spend too much time creating it, but I can talk about it at least because I have some time, some extra time that I can use. So the first part of this is going to be using the game, so the data collection swim lane. And by the way, I just used a template in LucidChart for this. LucidChart is 100% free until, well, it's not 100% free. It's free up to 40 items on a particular page. I think that's the free tier, at least last time I checked. And so you could create up to 40 objects in your diagram for free. So one of the objects I created was a swim lane diagram, which basically shows the different areas of this project in blue, green, purple, and pink. And so the first lane here is the data collection lane. That's going to be F1 2023. And using sim racing telemetry, I'm going to create 3 files, or Morse 314 is going to create 3 files. And it's fairly easy to do this in sim racing telemetry, so that's why I gave a quick turnaround time for Morse. But the data itself, sim racing sessions, for those who are not aware, sim racing sessions do take a long time. There's the practice for 10 minutes. There's qualifying, which takes up to 30 minutes technically, depending on how it goes. And then there's the race, a 5-lap race. You're looking at about 5 to 10 minutes, probably 10 minutes. So that's really important to know. With spa, you might be looking at 15 minutes, for example. All right. So basically the goal of the data collection phase is to produce 3 files. Those 3 files, they need to be ingested into SQL Server. But the reality is we have to move them over to the SQL Server first. So we're going to use PowerShell to move the files to our SQL Server directories. And I actually created, let's go ahead and just pull up the real project that we already had. Which is this one here, I believe. Yeah. Okay. This one's a bit more drawn out. And so I have a couple of different tasks here. I have it already separated into the data collection side. I have some for ingesting the files into SQL Server. But if you look, I also added one to just move the files into the SQL Server. And I created the task with a explicit source saying, hey, here's where you're going to find the files that were created. And they need to be dropped into this server. And here's the directory. And I have file 1, file 2, and file 3 as a checklist so that we can keep track of how things are going. This one is going to be, let's say, a 13 points, which is borderline. I need a few tasks for this, but it's okay because it's literally just moving the files. So creating the PowerShell scripts to move the files is one of the tasks. That's going to be done in PowerShell, as you can see from this diagram. Now, I wanted to make mention of the fact that this is an optional step, and so is this one down here. This data ingestion and data warehousing, that's technically optional, and you'll see that by having just this direct line that goes from the CSV file straight to Power BI. That means that technically speaking, the Power BI work, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the Power BI work can actually start while all of this is happening. And so that gives the data ingestion and data warehouse phases sort of a little bit of breathing room, and it also allows the BI development to start as soon as possible so that both sides can keep working. There's lower pressure. There's not as much unfortunately, sometimes when someone's left waiting for someone else, that's a tough situation to be in for the developers and for myself as the manager. And so I want to make sure I open up opportunities to be able to facilitate work, to be able to facilitate progress. And this is my quick thinking way during the last stream of how I could make sure that both teams could continue working, or both personnel could continue working. So here I just have a post-it note that says it's one CSV per file, and one script for a file, as you can see from the diagram. I want to make sure that these scripts are modular, meaning we can build the SPA script, we can build the Sandvort script and the Vega script independent of each other, and that means I can take one of them offline if I need to, or take 2 of them offline and keep working just in case there's an issue. Then we have our SQL Server portion, which is the data warehousing portion. Now here I have a server, it's called MicroPC1, and I mentioned that we need a database called SimRacingData, and it's going to be one table for all 3 files. As you can see here, all 3 files sort of converge onto one table. Now let's take a look at what that looks like in Windows. All right, so here we are in Windows, and I have SQL Server Management Studio open. Now, I went ahead a while ago, a very long time ago, I created a database called Data Driven Sim Racing. That's where I started putting all of my sim racing telemetry files because I was importing them, and I found a really easy way, or I made a really easy way to import these files. And so here, when I open up my tables, you can see that we had one file per session, basically, or one table per session. And that started to get really annoying really quick. So that's why in my diagram, I just have one simple table that all of the data converges on. And technically speaking, it could be one table per game, because sim racing telemetry's data is very, very similar. But I think I noticed that some of the files between games were a little bit different, and that's quite all right. That's just a result of the different games and the data you can collect from each. But I created a table called DDSR telemetry data. And here we have the table open. I just have a standard select top 1000 from this. And you can see something like a record ID. That's just an identifier. We can see the sim title. That's the game. The setup version on the car I was using. The date of the session. The import date of the data. And the file name. So that was really important to me, is knowing which file I got this data from, just so I could take a look back at the file to see if anything was messed up or corrupted, that sort of thing. All right, so let's go back over to the diagram. And here, down here, we can see that we have, again, the data converging into one table using 3 different PowerShell scripts. Now, the PowerShell scripts are going to share duty. They are going to move the file over to the server and also import the data using an application called DBA Tools. So I can actually specify that here. Let's paste a post-it note, and we can say import using DBA Tools.io. Now, for those of you who have not heard of dbatools.io, I'll go ahead and put a link in the chat here for y'all. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it in the description down here below, as well as this diagram. This diagram is going to be available in the description below, along with anything else really for this project. It's just going to be an ever-evolving sort of project. This is one of many sessions on it. I'm not really sure. So we want to make sure we use dbatools.io to import, which will make whoever's doing this, their job very easy. And then finally, we want to report on this data. So we want to make sure that the data is available to us, not only in CSV format so that we can start as soon as possible, but then after the fact, after we're done, or once the data is available, we want to go ahead and switch over to to SQL Server as our data source. So we want to make sure that we catalog all of this, and it's my job to do that. Sometimes we'll put it on the data architect if there's a data architect on the team. In that case, that's technically me, even though I'm the manager. And the database administrator sometimes has a hand on it. Sometimes I'll bring in the developers and ask them what technologies they want to use. For example, if they'd rather use Python instead of PowerShell, it's my job to know what they specialize in and what they feel comfortable for or using. And so maybe you'll use Python instead of PowerShell. Maybe we'll use Oracle instead of SQL Server. Maybe we'll use Postgres, etc. So that's what we want to facilitate as managers and as part of the team. You want to make sure you communicate that very, very clearly with each other, because that'll help the success of the project. All right. So again, we're going to hop over to our planner, which is this one right here. Now, again, this is going to facilitate stand-up meetings. It's going to facilitate sprint planning meetings. It's going to facilitate daily progress checkups for me and also for my superiors and our stakeholders for the project. If there's someone waiting on this, you may want to show them this board just to let them know, hey, here's how things are going. You could talk briefly about it. If it's too technical, that's okay, but I try to keep things both technical and also non-technical within the same area so that anyone can read this and get the information that they need. And just know that you can also, if you click on these ellipse here, you can export the plan to Excel, and you can just send it off to anyone who's interested as an Excel file. It's a pretty simple Excel file. It's not robust or anything, but that's Planner. It just helps you organize your team a little bit better. And again, if you have Microsoft Office, chances are you also have Microsoft Planner. That's a really easy way. And as you can see from the very top, this banner, apparently a new planner is coming soon. That message has been up there for a while now, and I still don't have new planner, so we'll see how that goes. You don't need Loop to use Planner, by the way. You could just start Planner projects without starting Loop stuff. So just keep that in mind. One more tool I want to show is Trello. Now, Trello is part of the Atlassian ecosystem, so the same folks that make Jira, the same folks that make Jira Service Desk, Confluence, etc., they have a free option called Trello. And I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to that as well. It's just Trello.com. I'll have a link to it in the description if you're watching on YouTube. But basically, this is just a way for you to plan out different projects. So the only reason I'm sharing this is because it's free, or it's free to a particular point. I'm using the free version. As you can see, I have a 14-day trial left, but you can keep using it after that trial is gone. I think the stipulation that they have is like 10 users, a maximum of 10 users can use it at the same time or be part of a team. And that's absolutely fine with me because I'm alone. I'm just SQL Dev Duty. I'm just on myself. So as you can see, there's just a standard board here. You can add tasks in the same exact way that I added them to our planner document. I can add a card here. For example, if I want to add the card that said to create a diagram, right? Create diagram and share with team. I just hit enter. The card gets created and then I can go in and edit it. Now, you can add some description. You can actually add custom fields, which is pretty cool. It's an advantage over Planner, actually, is you can add custom fields. One of the custom fields that I decided to add here is number of points. So now I can have this as a 3-pointer. I can still add all the detail, and down here you can actually write comments. You can tag people, your teammates, so that they get a notification, and it actually has a change tracking. So if you look, it says updated the value for the points for the custom field on this card. That's pretty cool. You can attach files, and you can do that in Planner too. You can set dates, you can add labels just like you did. You can add members to this task as well. I guess you can purchase power-ups. I'm not going to do that. And then you can add some automation if you so desire. You can also, if you're not involved in the task, but you want to be notified of progress, you can just kind of watch it and say, basically it'll subscribe you to any updates of this card. So again, you can add buckets here. So to do in progress done, if you remember, I had added a blocked bucket. So I'm going to add that here, and I'm just going to make sure it's in the same exact order. And so as we complete tasks, or as we have progress on tasks, we can move them to in progress. Really, you can handle it the same exact way as Planner. You can do more or less 99% of the things you can do with Planner, or find a creative way to do it. Trello is just a different option. If you're not a fan of Microsoft Office, that's absolutely fine. You have apps like Trello, and there's tons of apps that you can use. I'm not sure of many free ones. And I've also not used a lot of these. I've used Trello for years, and it's always worked out, and I've never paid for it. And so I like to share free tools that I find around the interwebs and that I think could help you. So I would say, I would challenge you to not just use this for this project if you're trying to follow along, but what you might want to do is also use it for your daily life. If you have homework, if you have school projects, try to create one board for each project here, and try to assign yourself tasks for that project. Because what you'll find is that once you split it out into different tasks, and you can kind of see these sort of as post-it notes, once you assign these tasks to yourself and break things down, you'll find that things are a lot more manageable for you, that it doesn't seem so overwhelming. And let's talk about that for a second. Let's go back to our planner project here. Where is it? Right here. Let's talk about being overwhelmed, and again, why I have these agile cards, why I ask for points. Why do I do all that? Well, it's a little selfish, if I'm honest. Part of it's for me, because it is my responsibility as a team lead, or as a project manager, or just a data team manager. It's my responsibility to ensure that the team members are only working on what they can manage. I usually use the first 3, we'll call them sprints, because that's what they're called. a sprint is basically an allotted set of time for folks to complete a specific number of tasks or a specific number of points. And why do I say it that way? It's because I use the first 2 sprints or so, which usually last anywhere from a week, sometimes a day or two, to maybe 2 weeks. Usually never longer than 2 weeks. But I try to use the first 2 as sort of a guide for myself. I'll sort of take a mental note or even a physical note, or like a BI note, of how many tasks or how many points each member of the team was able to complete reasonably. Why? Because that's going to help me sort of police this in the future. That's going to help me ensure that I can say with conviction, no, you know what? You cannot complete 30 points this sprint, because over the last 2 or 3 sprints, you've only been able to complete 15. It's not just because I want to challenge you to prove you wrong. It's because I don't want you to get overworked. That's my responsibility as a manager, to make sure that you're not overworked or overwhelmed. And I also may need it to prove to my superiors, hey, we need some additional resources. We need some help for this project. There's too many points. There's not enough people to complete them. We need some help, or we need to extend some deadlines. And from all the different superiors that I've had, not one of them has ever said, oh, you just say you need more? That's fine. Absolutely. More time, no problem. They've usually challenged me a little bit and said, hey, I'm happy to help you out here, but I need to understand the gravity of the situation. And with a board like this, I'd be able to prove and show them exactly what's going on, why we need more time or why we need more resources, and they're happy. They're absolutely happy to help. I've never met any resistance when I show them something like this. They see it right there with their own eyes. There's no way this project can continue or be done in a reasonable amount of time with the same resources that we have or the same time frame. So they're absolutely happy. They can take this to their superiors and let them know, or to stakeholders and let them know, hey, we need to push, or hey, we need more people. But the project's not going to get completed right now with what we have. And it's also a chance for you. And I urge you, if you're part of a process like this, I urge you to just be honest. And be honest with the number of points. Be honest with the level of complexity that these tasks have. Because the only person you're really lying to is yourself. Because if you promise 30 points and your manager or the project manager hasn't done their due diligence to challenge you on that, what's going to happen? The expectation is that you have those 30 points completed. What does that mean? That means get out the coffee, my friend. You're going to be working overnights, and wave hi to your family, because you're going to be working the weekends as well to make sure you meet these deadlines. And I don't want that for you. Nobody wants that for you. And so I would urge you to be honest with yourself, be honest with your team leads, with your peers, and just let them know, hey, this one's too tough, or hey, I can only complete 10 points this time. Maybe it's a way for me to also tell if someone has an emergency and they need to be out half of the week or half of the sprint urgently. It allows me to be able to redistribute the work. Maybe I see a 5-point task that they have and I try to help, or I try to pull in someone from another team to help, or I engage and try to collaborate with one of the remaining team members and see if we can both help this task out. We can't do that for a 21, but we may be able to do that for a 5-pointer, as you can see here. So that's really important for you to understand as well. So I think we covered a lot here. I had a lot of stuff already done from the Spanish stream. In the Spanish stream, I actually went ahead and created all of this that you see in front of you, including the diagram, all the planning, that kind of stuff. But this one, I was able to just relax a little bit and talk about it. And hopefully, this has been informative enough for you to get in touch with what a day-to-day looks like for a development team, or what a project looks like for a development team. And the reality is, this is a real project, folks. I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be following this plan. Obviously, I don't have Morse 314 to work with me as much as I'd love to. That'd be fantastic. I don't have a lot of help, so I'll be doing all of this, but I'm going to try my best to simulate what it's like to work on a project like this with a lot of team members. I'm going to be probably recording myself sim racing as well. That might be part of this. I'm not sure if I'm going to stream it. Maybe I'll stream one of the 3 events that I have, because I have 3 tracks. I have Vegas, I have Spa, and I have Zandvoort. And so I might stream one of those tracks and the practice, qualifying, and race sessions for those. Probably not all 3, but I will record myself so that you can see what all of that looks like. That's probably going to be the most fun part of this project, and the reality is I like what I do, so the rest of it's going to be fun as well. I'll stream the effort it takes to develop PowerShell scripts to move the files. I will stream the creation of the Power BI report, which I want to make sure my dev that's creating these Power BI reports, if we look back here, where's our loop? That's Jantonos. I want to make sure he understands what I want the report to look like, right? And to show him, I've actually added a link to his task, and I want it to look basically like this. If you haven't seen this report, this one was one I worked on maybe a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And the main goal of this was to show you how to use either fields parameters or just measures and columns and flags, particularly a function called selected value, to switch this report from imperial to metric with just the click of one button. And so right now, if you look, everything's in metric: kph, liters, tire temperature in Celsius, and pressure in bars, as well as kph here, liters for fuel by lap, and all of this stuff is also in metric. Now, you can basically just see the kilometers per hour, kph in metric. There's nothing else. But here, when I click imperial, everything switches to miles per hour, to gallons, to Fahrenheit, to PSI. Here's MPH again, here's gallons, and here's miles per hour, including in this map diagram. And so I want the report to look like this, and maybe some additional stuff. I want some metrics, like the percentage of gear, or the percentage of a lap I was in a particular gear. I want temperatures, I want lap times like you see in this grid down here below. I want lap times in there. I want the track layout just like I have here, but I want it dynamic. So it's going to be a lot of work. And again, if it was just, I want to get this done and I have the plan here, this is all really overwhelming. But the fact that we are breaking it down, the fact that we have isolated tasks per person, that makes the project a lot more manageable. All right, so that's all I wanted to cover today. I am hoping that this was informative for you. The reality is there's going to be another session, so if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll probably be a compilation and you'll be able to see the next video already, or somewhere on the list. I don't know, up here or up there. I don't know where to point because I'm not sure where YouTube's going to put it. Maybe down here. You will see the resources that I used all in the description below, the websites I use for planning. If I can export this plan as well, I'll go ahead and do it. Maybe take a screenshot of it. I'm not sure. The resources for Trello, the resources for LucidChart, all that stuff's going to be around. And so, again, I hope this was informative for you. If you have any questions at all, or just need any advice, if you need to pick my brain about any projects, for example, anything that you saw today, please feel free to reach out. You can do so on Twitch. You can do so on Instagram. I have my socials. That's not how you spell socials. I have my socials. That's also not how you spell socials. I have my socials available for anyone who needs to. My link tree, which is the first link you see there, that's going to take you to all of them, and you can message me on the Twitter, on the email, on a contact form on my website. You can see my Power BI demos, etc. All right, so again, I hope this was informative for you, and I hope that again, you can see this diagram. I hope that you learn from this that it's okay to question points. It's okay to have educated discussions about all of your tasks. It's okay to be honest about the workload that you have, and it's a good thing to separate everything out for your plan. So I'm going to get started, and I'm not really going to get started right now, but I'm going to get started on this, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a wonderful night.